There is a force at sea and on land protecting Europe's borders. It is called Frontex, and it's about to get bigger, with increasing accusations that it's brutal and that it's simply there to keep migrants and asylum seekers out. People have died because of Frontex is the claim, more than 2,000 of them. But who holds Frontex to account? Is it time for the courts to decide? This is Roundtable. Hello and welcome from me, David Foster. Is Frontex breaking laws? Is it breaching human rights? Is it too powerful? That's what we'll discuss on this programme. The European Union is giving more power to the EU's border control agency Frontex. The European Commission aims to supply Frontex with extra workers and equipment, including increasing operational staff to 10,000 by 2027. EU officials say they want to strengthen the region's borders and increase the return of asylum seekers and migrants trying to enter Europe. A recent investigation by the UK newspaper The Guardian found that EU nations used illegal operations to push back at least 40,000 asylum seekers during the pandemic, with these actions being linked to the deaths of more than 2,000 people. Frontex is currently under investigation by the EU's anti-fraud watchdog OLAF over allegations of harassment, misconduct and unlawful operations aimed at stopping asylum seekers from reaching EU shores. Can the agency be trusted to conduct lawful operations on EU borders? Well, let's go first of all on this roundtable. We'll do Florence in Italy, and we see Omer Shatz, their legal director of Front-lex, an organisation taking Frontex to court. In London, we welcome Jane Kilpatrick, a researcher focusing on Frontex at Statewatch, and then we go to Athens. And welcome back once again to Roundtable, Yonous Muhammadi, co-founder of the Greek Forum of Refugees. We'll get stories from Greece in just a moment, Yonous. But Omer, let me go to you first of all. What is the essence of your case against Frontex?
So essentially there are two cases. One case is now already been admitted to the International Criminal Court in The Hague, and it concerns the policies of Frontex in the central Mediterranean, where Fabrice Leggeri, the executive director, and other Frontex officials are suspected in the commission of crimes against humanity for causing the deaths of more than 20,000 individuals in the Mediterranean and the forcible transfer of more than 60,000 civilians that tried to flee the armed conflict in Libya and were transported back to camps where, according to the ICC prosecutor, crimes against humanity against migrants are being committed since as early as 2016. The second case that we are on it now concerns the Eastern Mediterranean, the Aegean Sea region, the border between Turkey and Greece. And over there, Frontex is accused of crimes against humanity, of deportation and persecution and other inhumane acts for complicity in the abduction, forcible transfer, and abandonment at sea of more than 10,000 asylum seekers just in 2020, just in the past year. And this case will go to the Court of Justice of the European Union really soon.
Yonous, let me come to you since Omer mentions the Eastern Mediterranean. It's some months since you were on the programme talking about this issue, about confrontation in open waters. Has anything changed since you last came on and said that the number of cases was increasing?
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, nothing has been changed, and the change has been more negative. It means that we have the rise of the cases of pushbacks. And unfortunately, we have also more incidents of pushbacks and people who lost their lives either in Mediterranean Sea or at the land border between Turkey and Greece. Unfortunately, although that there has been some sound, some positive voices, I can say it, but not exactly some practical results. But we have seen from European parliaments, we saw that the head of Frontex has been called for a briefing by this committee of Libe. But unfortunately, we don't see any result, and we see that this practice from Frontex is going on. And we see also a good news also from Greece, that the Greek court also, that it is just today I hear that they want to bring those 700 cases of pushbacks last year to the Greek court, which is a positive news, but we are not sure still how it would be done. It is just a news that it came out from a newspaper.
Okay, so Jane, if the Greek government, if the European Parliament say they're not happy with the way that Frontex is operating, what is happening here?
Yeah, well, that's quite a big question, really. I think most organisations working on the legislation side and the background behind Frontex's growing powers were quite hopeful in 2019 that the new regulation would incorporate a lot higher parliamentary scrutiny of their actions, as well as higher powers for their internal mechanisms like the Fundamental Rights Officer, complaints mechanism and serious incident reports. I think it's fair to say that we've all been quite severely disappointed, and actually monitoring the progress of the parliamentary scrutiny group, it's striking that many of the civil society or journalists or actual first-hand witnesses of the pushbacks being investigated haven't been invited to some of these hearings. So there is some concern that for this first 4 months fact-finding mission, which the Frontex scrutiny group in the European Parliament has within its mandate, that actually not all of the facts are yet being considered. So the sort of research civil society is attempting to put forward evidence at the moment to make sure that cases of pushbacks are considered not just in the Aegean, but also in the Western Mediterranean and also at land borders as well.
Jane, what are the facts that you say need to be uncovered then?
Firstly, there's a wide variety of testimonies that have been collected by different organisations, most notably the Border Violence Monitoring Network, who have been very active throughout the Balkan region, collecting first-hand testimony from people who say that they have been subjected to pushbacks, sometimes violent pushbacks, along the Balkan route, and that where that has happened, they've identified border guards who have not been speaking the local language, so therefore it's possible that they have been seconded through a Frontex mission, or they've been wearing the blue EU armband that's very typical for, and it's part of the old Frontex uniform. So there's always been a lot of opacity about those testimonies and not much response from Frontex, who have been contacted directly by these organisations expressing their concerns.
So is it such, sorry, can I just try and get a picture in my head? Is it such a fragmented organisation at the moment that nobody knows who is operating where? When you come across somebody who says they're from Frontex, you can't be sure that they're part of the main organisation. They could, as you say, just be seconded. That it's a bit of a mess.
I think, yes, it's hard to pin down exactly what goes on. A big change that happened in 2019 was that for the first time, Frontex has become able to directly employ its own border guards. So previously to that, employees of national border authorities would be seconded to Frontex operations. Since early 2020, Frontex can hire its own border staff.
Well, I think hang on a second, Jane. I think Omer wants to say something in response to what you just said.
Yeah, unfortunately, I must say I disagree with both speakers because first, there is no issue of evidence. There is plenty of evidence, objective, external, that cannot be disputed. Der Spiegel, Bellingcat, Lighthouse, investigative journalism provided abundance of evidence. Me as a criminal defense lawyer by training, I've never had so many evidence that are not in dispute. So it's not an issue of evidence or testimonies or language and so forth. So there is no factual
Well, perhaps
issue.
it's the fact that while there is evidence there, nobody's quite prepared to go and look for it in the way that you are. And perhaps nobody's prepared to listen.
And this is my second point, which the other speaker was saying there are some partially positive signs. No, this organization, as you suggested, is not fragmented. It's highly centralized, but it's by design intended to enjoy full impunity. So the European Commission, it's not acting on its own volition. It's in line with the EU Commission and EU Council and all the other EU bodies' agenda and policies. And there is no oversight, not a legal oversight, not administrative oversight. The other speaker just mentioned there are human rights monitors that do not exist. There are internal investigations that result with zero consequences. And there is the European Parliament, who has no power. I mean, with other respect,
let's bring up a quote from the European Council for Refugees and Exiles, allied to what you just said. This is part of its statement. Frontex has seen a rapid expansion in size, budget, manpower, but oversight mechanisms are struggling to catch up, leading to a situation of power without accountability. Yonous, I'll be back with you in just a moment, but Jane, is that your concern, that it is answerable, as Omer said, to nobody in particular?
Yeah, I think I would completely agree with how Omer put it, actually, that the structures such as they are for oversight are almost entirely internal. Most kind of follow-up actions are at the discretion of the executive director, and that's why it is so difficult to get accountability and then also to connect the dots of different evidence. And what I was really trying to point to in the concerns of kind of the accessibility of that evidence is that we have testimonies of people who have been subjected to pushbacks, and those testimonies aren't being considered by some of these investigatory bodies, such as the scrutiny group hearings. And I think that's our concern at the moment, is that there's evidence available, and the people who might have an opportunity to hold Frontex a little bit accountable don't seem to be getting hold of it or have the will to bring it forward.
There are two sides to this, aren't there? There's the concerns of those of you who are looking at it from above, and there's the concerns of those on the ground or at sea. And Yonous, since you represent the Greek Forum of Refugees, what would you say their major concern is? That there's no accountability, or that they feel their lives are in danger?
Yeah, that's sure. What we see there is no accountability on what Frontex is doing and what border guard is doing. Unfortunately, the perspective, what we see that there is no hope that something will change, and the change will be more negative. And it has really a negative impact on the peoples who in need of international protections. Even they are disappointed having access to the international protection system, which Europe is calling for. And so many people, they are losing their lives. It is not just 40,000 people that are pushed back, or 2,000 people that they are killed, according to the Guardians, but there are much more people. They are the cases that have been registered. There are so many cases that never has been registered, and the people that they have been pushed back, and no one has seen them, and many people has died, unfortunately, especially this buffer zone that exists between in agency and also at the different borders. It is not just Greek and Turkish border. We see the Croatian and Bosnian border that so many.
So let me throw this up in the air for you to consider, Yonous. I'll probably come to you first on this, Omer. How did it ever get to this point? Presumably it was set up with, one imagines, the best intentions. How did we get to this stage?
In my view, I mean, I question the good intentions. There is a policy in the Mediterranean, in the Eastern, Central, also the Western, and the aim of this policy is to stem migration flows at all costs. The costs are genocidal. In terms of figures and gravity, 20,000 in the Mediterranean killed by drowning. It's 3 times more than Srebrenica, the genocide. And the impunity. Well, how we came to this point? I think there is one elephant in the room that we must address, and that is the courts. I mean, the parliament is powerless. The commission and the council are quite pleased with the role of Fabrice Leggeri as the front of the executing their policies. But where are the courts? Where is the judicial review over serious breaches of international law by liberal democracy outside an armed conflict. This is not the UK in Iraq or the US in Afghanistan. This is not an armed conflict. And since World War II, for the first time, European governments are committing atrocity crimes. So where are the courts in this? Why this agency for 15 years enjoys full impunity? No one took even one case, human rights law case, to the courts, or so to seek individual accountability and against the agents of this agency. So at the head of this agency, there is a man who cannot be fired by the European Commission, and he's corrupted, and he has an army. Now, as my colleague just said, they will have 10,000 soldiers armed, and there is no way to control this army that is controlled by one man whose name is Fabrice Leggeri.
Jane, let me come to you and ask you what your thoughts are on protecting your national and international borders. Do you think the European Union was right to put into place some kind of protection, such as it is, even if it has turned out not to your satisfaction?
I know, and I don't think it is a case. I agree with Omer on this. I don't think it's a case of good intentions being sort of diluted over years. I think that Frontex is the way it is because that's exactly how member states.
But does a bloc or a country have a right to protect its borders?
From armed invasion, I assume so. But like people arriving to the external borders aren't something to protect from. These are people in need of protection, but like in need of Europe's protection, international protection. So I think that framing the control of borders as purely a security and protection of sovereignty issue is completely false, because we've sort of as a public been tricked into this idea of defence and the need to protect our borders, but we're not being invaded. It's a complete trick of language.
Well, can we therefore move on to the next stage, which is what would you have in its place? How would you change this? Jane, we're with you at the moment. Would you see Frontex abolished?
Yes, I would, and I think that there is a danger of focusing all of this rhetoric on just Frontex and forgetting that Frontex is the result of migration and border policy, and that those are the things that need to be really addressed. Because
would you just leave your borders open in that case for anybody to come and go as they pleased?
Well, actually, there is some very interesting literature about how that would create a much better economic situation the world over. I think we've got a little bit conceptual for me as a researcher on international law, but yeah.
I'm just asking for a personal opinion. I mean, what would you do? Would you just leave the borders open?
I don't think I can answer that question, honestly.
Okay. Yonous, let me come to you. What do you think needs to change? Does Frontex need to go? Does anything need to come in its place?
The first, I think we should, as European citizens, European institutions and European bodies, as Frontex and every institutions, they have one important role. It is the defending and promoting the European values. I think it is the most important thing. Europe is not threatened and blackmailed by any forces or militaries. So militarization of borders, it is not needed. Actually, Frontex should have the role of defending and promoting these values, not violating actually the human rights at the border of Europe. There are
so sorry, let me try and get this clear. Frontex should perhaps be just out there trying to help people to make sure they get to land and then helping them on their way, escorting them through, or should there be some kind of rule of law in this?
Of course, there should be some observation on the borders. It is the right of Europe, it is the right of countries at the border, but it doesn't mean that that we should forget the basic roles and the basic job that we have. It is saving the lives that those, especially those who are in needs and in needs of international protections. I think what is important now, it is the fear that leads the decision, the making of decision in Europe. Fear from those who are forced to leave their countries and those who are in need of international protection. Let's be very clear. I think it is not the way. There are mechanisms. Europe can create mechanisms in order to save the lives, and also to observe the borders also. Of course, to not, we have also tensions, especially in agency. We should not forget the tensions between Turkey and Europe and Greece. And those people in need of intervention should not be victims of this tension. I think.
Okay, so Omer, let me come to you. Yonous, it's not the end of it. Don't worry, I will come back. Omer, I don't know what the intention of your court case is, presumably to hold Frontex to account, but with what consequences you can explain to me. Would you like to see the agency abolished? Would you like to see something in its place or nothing at all?
I would like to see the agency abolished, but I don't mind another agency that is a coercive law enforcement border agency of the European Union. And to your question, no one is talking about opening the borders, letting everyone through. This kind of rhetoric is just instrumental to a very simple fact that, as you would not cross the street in a red light, right? Why? Because it's the law. And the law commands that people in need of protection, their asylum claim should be processed. They have a right to enter and seek asylum, and they have a right not to be deported to the place they fled from if there is risks over there and so forth. This is, it's not a discussion about the migration policy.
But equally, let me just put this point to you. The law of the United Kingdom, where I happen to be sitting, says you must also abide by the regulations regarding entry, that you have to have the proper documents, that you have to have applied in the right manner. So there are different laws depending on which way you look at it.
It's a very important point that you raise, because with all the laws of the UK is still a party to a number of international and regional instruments, the European Convention of Human Rights, the Refugee Convention, and so on. And in this convention, each person can enter regularly or irregularly and seek asylum. And then, as you said, we won't let everyone in without any control. To the contrary, what we are seeking is control and considering the request in good faith. And those who are entitled should receive protection. Those who are not can be deported even, and so forth. No one is, this is rhetoric of like, so it's either no borders or crimes against humanity, killing intentionally people and letting them drown, or kidnapping them from asylum reception center in Lesbos, putting them on unworthy rubber boats and abandoning them in the middle of the sea, babies, children, women, for the entire night. This is an attempt murder. It's not either or. There is international law, and there is the UK law where you reside. And these laws, which I'm familiar with them very well, command a commitment to the notion of the rights of men, to the liberal ethos. This is a decision.
No, I do understand that, and I understand your argument. It's a very emotional argument. We're coming towards the end of the program. I just want to ask you, Jane, if I may. I'll come back to you, Yonous, in a moment if I have time. Do you think you will be successful in changing the way that Frontex operates? I don't mean you personally, but I mean you as a group of people that don't like what it's been doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the realist in me thinks it's unlikely that we'll have that much success. But actually, I do think that with the huge increase in investigations that are underway at the moment, like after 17, 18 years of this agency, suddenly we're having like attempts at oversight. I do think that there will be increased, at least attempts to hold the agency accountable, and perhaps some real force behind the parts of its regulation that require.
And is something like it needed, but in a different form, or as you said, perhaps nothing at all?
I mean, I think this has been covered quite extensively by the other speakers. Like surveillance at borders, I think, is a reality. I think what Frontex is much more of a like external actor. It acts in non-EU countries, spreading EU border control outside the EU. It has a huge influence in terms of data gathering, I think, and analysis, and it in turn feeds into EU policy. So I do think that that it isn't the simplified kind of border control that
No,
it's
of course
understood
it
as.
isn't. Of course it isn't. Which makes me feel rather guilty about putting this one to you, Yonous, and asking you to be very brief about it. As long as we have migration, as long as we have conflict, we're always going to have issues like this, aren't we?
Yeah, unfortunately, the perspective, what we see that we cannot stop refugees and migration to come. It is not refugees that they want to leave and they want to come to Europe. Unfortunately, they are forced to leave. So here in Europe, I think we should see what is going on. From one side, we are putting Frontex on different forces against whom? Against those refugees and asylum seekers, actually. And what Frontex should do, it is actually protecting the European and international laws for those people, for asylum seekers and refugees, which is very clear. If these laws and international laws and regulations are implemented well, I think that is the only way. That is the only solution.
Thank you very, very much indeed, and we'll wait to see what happens in those various court cases that we've mentioned on this edition of Roundtable. I thank you very much indeed for taking part, and I thank you wherever you are for watching Roundtable. From me, David Foster, from the team that made it possible. We hope to have your company next time. Until then, goodbye.